turn to the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line. Our good friend back here on the Rich Eisen Show from the NFL Media Group is Tom Pelissero. How you doing, Tom?
That felt like a lot of math to start a segment. Rick.
It was. It was too much, and I'm more verbal than anything else. Let's just jump into it. The cut day story is which? What? The cut day story.
I think that the cut down day story was really that there wasn't, now granted, we still got some ripple effects. There's this long window here this week before rosters truly get set, but there wasn't really that, shocking move. The biggest trade that got done was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson being traded from the Saints to the Eagles. He'll play safety there for him and be a starter and hopes that he can cash in. That obviously lends a different dynamic to the Eagles defense because when, you always know when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is on the field, and opponents definitely know when he's on the field. So that was a significant move, but, Jimmy Garoppolo not going to a new team, that was something that had kind of been in the works for a week or so. The fact that got done, that was part of it, but you didn't have that, out of left field type of massive earth-shaking trade, though again, it's early here, and by moving cut downs up from Saturday to Tuesday, you kind of create this little bit of a vacuum where some teams are holding on to players in, hopes or thinking that maybe there's still a trade to be had here in the coming days.
So why did the Saints trade away a player who the Eagles can maybe win a Super Bowl with? Why can't the Saints hold on to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? What happened there? He's
in a contract year, and they had offered him what they thought was a strong deal for the nickel market. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is watching Derwin James and Minkah Fitzpatrick and all these safeties getting paid about double what the top of the nickel market is. He's thinking he should be paid at that level, even though he spent about 2/3 of his snaps in New Orleans playing the slot. So he and his agent, Kevin Connor, basically said, we're not going to engage on this. The Saints then turn their attention to a trade, and they end up finding a team in the Eagles that actually will play him at safety. And if Gardner-Johnson plays the way that he has in the past at a new position here, he could be a very rich man in the not too distant future.
So what's also with all of the backup quarterbacks who got cut yesterday, what was that all about? I mean, you spend all spring and OTAs and training camp bringing these guys along, and then all of a sudden, see you later, and they start swapping them out right before the beginning of the season. What happened there?
It's a combination of factors. Detroit is kind of on their own where they knew, and they were actually public about it, that they didn't think that they had a number 2 quarterback on their team. They didn't think that David Blau or Tim Boyle stepped up. And then, Nate Sudfeld ends up getting let go, which was a product of Jimmy Garoppolo staying and the fact that Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, had been very relevant in camp. I got a chance to see him live. I mean, he looks like an NFL quarterback, a guy who's got a shot, so they keep him. Sudfeld then ends up coming available, and Detroit signs him and cuts Blau late last night. But a lot of the other ones is a product of, a couple of things. One, the way that the injured reserve rules are set, that you need to hold the player until 4 o'clock today before putting them on IR to be eligible to return during the season. So there's teams that are kind of floating veterans who they know are unlikely to sign someplace else. You can't actually enter into an agreement, but you can have, certainly there's plenty of teams that wink nods with players that, hey, we're going to bring you back once this IR stuff settles. And then the other factor is the COVID rules regarding veterans on the practice squad, and the fact that you have expanded practice squads were so popular among clubs that they actually voted to adopt a good number of those. So you now can have veterans on practice squads, and so a lot of these vested players, when you're talking about, off the top of my head, guys like Cooper Rush and Josh Johnson, there's other ones, Logan Woodside. You probably can, in some cases they haven't got to go through waivers, but you can bring guys back on the practice squad, then have elevations to bring them up for at least the first few weeks. Again, it takes a while for rosters to settle, and teams like flexibility. That's what these new rules give them. It just so happens that a lot of these backup quarterbacks end up being in this little bit of a limbo where you're going to be back. We want you back, but it might be the 53 or it might be the practice squad for a minute, and it might not be till Friday because you got these IR things. It's a product of the rules. A lot of these guys are going to be back with those same teams.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's linger on the Cowboys a little bit here, Tom. Dak Prescott's the only quarterback on their 53-man. What's up with that? And clearly they're going to go with the rookie to replace Tyron Smith, correct? That's what they're going to do here?
It sure looks like they're going in-house, and Tyler Smith would be the logical man up. It's a lot to ask of a player who was in a competition at guard and probably was not going to win the competition at guard now to go and start at left tackle. But the people I've spoken to in Dallas are all expressing confidence that they've got enough guys, they've got the right people in place. They've thought about this. I mean, Tyler Smith has missed a ton of games. You look back over going back to the 2020 season, he's missed about twice as many games as he's played, if you include the time he's going to miss this season. So they were planning for that. That's why they drafted Tyler Smith. This is one of those future is now moments under unfortunate circumstances. But yeah, I anticipate Tyler Smith quite possibly is going to be the starting left tackle. They may not, say anything on that though until they actually line up in week one. And in terms of backing up Dak Prescott, that's another situation where I would anticipate that both Cooper Rush, who's vested, so he can immediately re-sign it, in a little bit here once the personnel notice comes out, he can re-sign to the practice squad. And then if Will Grier clears waivers, they'll in all likelihood bring him back too and have three guys on the roster, even if they're not on the 53.
Right, but somebody's going to have to back him up when toe meets ball on Sunday Night Football, right? I mean, that's going to have to happen.
Right, but you've got the elevations. You still can do several, it started out as the COVID elevations. Now you can have standard elevations where you bring them up. They're technically still on your practice squad, but you can do it, I believe, 3 times now without having to pass back through waivers. So they could bring up a Will Grier, bring up Cooper Rush for the first 3 weeks. And then again, maybe somebody gets hurt. Now you got a 53 spot, and you actually bring them up to the 53 come week 4. That's just kind of how the rules are set up.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. So when Jimmy Garoppolo re-signs or redoes his contract to stay put with the 49ers, if there was a GoPro on John Schneider, the GM of the Seattle Seahawks, what would it say? Him pounding the table, or him just smiling, laughing, or not having anything to think about it because they weren't going to go in that direction anyway? What do you got for me on that front?
From my understanding, that the Seattle aspect of this with Jimmy Garoppolo was overblown. If he were to be released, would they have had interest? Sure. They always are in on, talking to different guys. But, in terms of them trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, that was always far-fetched. They think that in Geno Smith and Drew Lock, they've got a couple of good enough quarterbacks that they can play the way that they want to this season. I'd say that Garoppolo wouldn't be an upgrade, but they weren't, making big offers, and the 49ers were turning it down. This was a product of the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo kind of figuring out that each other were the best option. For Garoppolo, I'm sure people thinking, okay, why would Jimmy take this massive pay cut and go back to be a backup? Well, on the flip side of that, where else was he going to go? Where was he going to go and make more money and have a better chance to succeed? This was all about getting healthy and being able to preserve his earning power for 2023. So he accomplished that, and he'll go back, and whether he plays there, maybe he gets traded before the deadline, or if he ends up playing out the season or riding the bench for the full season, he'll end up being one of the frontline guys in free agency in 2023.
Well, I didn't think Seattle was going to ever trade for him. I mean, my gosh, trade partners between the 49ers and the Seahawks, I can't even conceive that at the quarterback spot, too. Certainly if Seattle's in a tight spot in their quarterback room, and a lot of the rest of the league believes that they are. Seattle may not, but the rest of the league believes that they are, and thought that potentially Garoppolo would be cut. And the fact that he wasn't was the surprise. And I know that they decided that they would be best for each other. Is it best for Trey Lance is the question. Walk me through that process best that you could tell there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was certainly part of it, but this was something they were thinking about going back months. I mean, literally months. That they had the thought going all the way back to March that this was a possibility. Once Jimmy had the surgery, that skewed the timeline, and so there was a consideration that the 49ers were ultimately, regardless of what they said publicly, could end up with him back in the fold. It certainly looked like there were possibilities of a trade, that there were possibilities of different things that could happen, but this was always something that was in the back of their heads. To Trey Lance's credit, is this a comfortable situation? No. But it's the same room you had last year. They've thrown their full weight behind Trey Lance as the starter. And it just changes the dynamic of if he struggles out of the gate, you're going to face a lot of questions, and that's what they've kind of raised on themselves here.
Tom Pelissero, NFL Network, here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's the deal with Lamar's contract now that we are, let me get this straight, about 12 days away from the start of the season and this being put on the back burner if it doesn't happen?
Well, it's a complicated deal to do. Lamar has shed via via some Twitter comments that, where things stand in terms of they haven't offered a fully guaranteed contract to him, up at the level that he's been looking for. So, yeah, I mean, at some point you would think this could go all the way up till Saturday. They definitely would like to get a deal done. Lamar on some level has to want to get a deal done, but, they've been unwilling to take anything less than the level of contract that, Deshaun Watson got. So it's, again, this will go all the way down to the wire. It's a big bet by Lamar, but remember, he's also making a lot more money this year than he was last year. So to the extent that he's taken this risk on himself, the real risk was last year playing for like $2 million. This year playing for, substantially more than that is, somewhat less of a risk. But certainly if you're leaving that type of money on the table, it's a big gamble going forward.
So, okay, there's a couple things here on that front. So the Deshaun Watson contract, where he gets every dollar guaranteed with, 24 plus civil lawsuits hanging over his head, that contract that the Browns gave Watson, the Cardinals get a contract signed with their guy, Kyler Murray, and it doesn't have every dollar guaranteed like Watson's. So the Cardinals were able to get through signing their guy with Watson's contract not blowing the whole thing up. And the Ravens now are the ones caught in the trap of the Watson contract, is what you're saying right now?
Correct. And every team that had a quarterback contract coming up knew when that deal got done that this could be a massive problem going forward. I mean, that was the reality of it, was that this could be a real problem for other teams to get deals done. The Kyler contract is a little different because if you just look at the nuts and bolts of his deal, it's a strong deal for Kyler Murray because he didn't have leverage. He was due like $5 million this season. What was he going to do? He could sit out. He could cause a stink, but ultimately there was only so much they could do. With Deshaun, and even Lamar Jackson, he's entering his fifth-year option year, and, they could tag him twice. So he does not have necessarily the highest amount of leverage. Deshaun Watson, very serious allegations of sexual misconduct, uncertainty about him being suspended this year. But when he became available, as one league executive put it to me at the time, that wasn't a trade. That was free agency. He had 4 or 5 teams bidding against each other. The Browns at one point were told, you're out. They got back in by coming up with that contract. So again, regardless of what was going on and serious allegations off the field, from a football perspective, Deshaun Watson had a virtually unprecedented level of leverage in the negotiation. It's the only reason that deal gets done. There are a lot of teams that are still mad at the Browns about that deal. And, look, even within the division, not just Lamar Jackson, but you can bet when Joe Burrow is coming up on a new contract and he'll be eligible after this season, his agent is going to want a fully guaranteed contract. And the question then becomes, at some point, number one, do the rules change? Does the funding rule change so that owners don't have to start putting $200 million in escrow to fund these contracts? Or two, is there a push among the agents then that, okay, if you're not going to do a fully guaranteed 5 or 6-year deal, we want to do a fully guaranteed, let's say, 3-year deal and say we're not going to sign for anything beyond that. In other words, historically, teams have done these, big guarantees in year one, a lot of money up front, but then basically bought up future years 4, 5, 6 that aren't guaranteed. You've seen it in the receiver market that all the top receivers right now are getting 3-year deals, and that comes down to individual contract precedent. If teams are not going to buy into the Browns as a precedent on a fully guaranteed 5-year deal, you could certainly see an environment where the agents start saying, that's fine, but we're not taking any non-guaranteed money on this deal. Let's start talking about a 3-year extension, and we'd have to see whether that's the way the quarterback market goes as the receiver.
Wow, because next up is Burrow and Herbert, which is part of the reason why I think the Bengals finally decided to sell a naming right to their stadium. So that's coming up after this playing season. But for the here and now, Lamar Jackson, the Deshaun Watson contract is, in fact, screwing up what the Ravens are trying to do with their guy. And I'm not saying that Lamar's wrong for taking this stance. So all said and done, did Kyler do the Cardinals a favor not having this stance? Like, because the Cardinals could have been first up on that train that the Ravens are driving and riding on right now.
Right. But again, Kyler had, think about this. Okay, if you're Kyler, like, what do you do? $5 million this year, 5th-year option in 2023, 2 tags beyond that. That's 4 years of team control. So for Kyler, at some point, it's you take this deal that gives you this massive raise. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I want to say he went from like making $5 million this year to $30 million this year, and it's like $90 or $100 million over 3 years. Like, you're starting the money train rolling now. And by the time you get 3 or 4 years into that deal, they're probably looking to do a new deal, as opposed to you trying to play out this year, potentially holding out half the season, then playing next year. You would have to go so far down the line. That's why nobody was able to replicate what Kirk Cousins did. He got 3 years, $84 million, fully guaranteed from the Vikings. That was that shorter-term, fully guaranteed deal. Nobody was able to replicate that, but nobody did what Cousins did, which was play out his rookie contract as a 4th-round pick, so he didn't have the 5th-year option, which ends up being an advantage, gets tagged once, plays through that, going to get tagged again. Only because of that is he able to get to the market. Lamar could do the same thing, but because he was a first-round pick, you're talking about 7 years, presuming that they tag him twice. So 7 years total in his career, 2 more seasons beyond this one before you would have that type of leverage. That's why Deshaun Watson, again, had the football leverage to get that contract done, because everyone knew, okay, this guy is essentially a free agent. The Texans are moving on from him. We all know it's going to be 3 first-round picks and more. Now you are just bidding with the contracts. And how did the Cleveland Browns ultimately get him? Yes, Deshaun Watson liked what he heard from Jimmy Haslam. He liked what he heard from the coaching staff. He had weapons in Cleveland to work with, a really good defense there. But it's money. Money's a huge part of it. They were willing to fully guarantee a 5-year contract, even though they knew every other owner was going to be mad about it. They were willing to do that to get the player. There's not many guys who are on their existing rookie contracts who will ever come close to having that type of leverage.
Last thing for you, Tom. I know we all have Watson fatigue. I have it. We all have it. And he has been suspended, and so thus he's now off a lot of people's radar screens. But Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com, covering the team, spoke to an NFL senior advisor on domestic violence and sexual assault named Rita Smith recently. And these comments, if they were said during the period where there was an appeal of the original suspension, this would have been front page news everywhere and on every show like this one. But I think we're all fatigued by Watson and the story. And she said to Mary Kay Cabot, I feel like Deshaun, is playing us. He's saying exactly what he thinks he needs to say to get on the field again. He's not thinking strategically at all about, did I cause harm to other people? He's not questioning any of his behaviors at all. He's absolutely certain from that last statement, I've done nothing wrong, is what she's ascribing to him. This is all about people trying to get at me, and I just want to go play ball. Is she part of the process to determine whether he gets back on the field? How much should we be paying attention to what is going on behind the scenes for Watson to get back on the field, if you will, on time?
Well, first of all, that's the first time I've heard those quotes, Rich. I've been sort of underwater with cuts.
Understood. That's part of why I'm bringing it up, I guess, too, yeah. Tom. I'm sorry if I'm just throwing something on live radio TV here, but I know you're definitely fully knowledgeable on the suspension and things of that nature. How much should we be paying attention to this sort of stuff, Tom?
Right. What I would say, generally speaking, is there is a process here under the terms of his settlement with the NFL by which he needed, and I believe he has undergone, an evaluation by clinicians who are experts in the field, who then will set out a treatment/counseling/therapy plan, whatever they decide. and he has to follow it. If he does not follow the plan, if he misses counseling sessions, if he has any other issues following whatever it is they lay out, that will constitute a new violation under the personal conduct policy and possibly could delay his anticipated 12th game return to the Cleveland Browns. So we have seen that in other cases before. Under the drug policy, for instance, which is a different protocol, but it's a comparable thing where the medical advisors lay out the plan and then the players have to follow it, like Martavis Bryant missed counseling sessions and did not get back. Josh Gordon, on multiple occasions, had his reinstatement delayed. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that if whatever it says in that plan, which is, of course, confidential between him and his, the clinicians, but if he violates that, then he would not get onto the field. Does that include public statements of remorse at a time that he still has a civil lawsuit pending? I would tend to doubt that because this is, the medical piece of it. It's not any type of, PR piece of it. What is he saying behind closed doors in a confidential setting versus what he's saying publicly? I can't tell you that either. But I would say there is a plan that he has to follow or he can be kept off the field, later on in the season. He'll be out of the building for the next month here. So, it's one of those many things that you have to monitor closely and, what he's doing. And, it would be a good sign for him if he's back in the building as scheduled October 10th, I believe is the date, that he has been following the plan. But, yeah, this is an extraordinarily complicated and I would say unprecedented matter for the NFL. The league was always going to face substantial criticism, whatever came out of this new disciplinary process that was jointly negotiated with the NFL Players Association. But the bottom line is Deshaun Watson has to follow whatever he is told to do by the doctors or they can keep him off the field.
Tom, greatly appreciate it. Let's talk as the season moves along, and I'll be seeing you on Game Day Morning and all those other programs on NFL Network. Thanks for the time, brother.
Can't wait, Rich. Thanks.
Thank you. That's Tom Pelissero right there, channeling his inner Bart Scott for the football season and everything else right here on the Rich Eisen Show.